You're listening to the Road to Wisdom podcast, weaving stories told by wonderful minds about all things motherhood, health, intimacy, politics, nature, and everything in between.
Join us on an adventure discovering unique experiences that we can learn from to enhance the ways in which we live.
We are your hosts, Chloe
and Kashia. Welcome everyone to the Road to Wisdom podcast. Today I am recovering from something. Something. So if I'm extra nasally, apologies, but we are trumping on. We have Addison in the studio today from Uplifted Collective, and I'm exceptionally excited about this talk. Addison cooked for me and Chloe prenatally. Can I say that? Yep. Yeah. Prenatally. And it was such a godsend, Addison, to have those meals. She stocked full chest freezers of food for us for our postpartum. And I think you finished yours
before I had the baby.
No, because it was that good.
The treats didn't
last long.
The treats were so good, but as soon as the kids were onto it, they were like in the freezer just sneaking around. And so we'd bring something up every now and again, and it was just like, it was not for me. But I did get to eat those incredible, what were the chocolate?
Oh, they're like fat
bombs. Oh my God,
yeah.
the fat bombs. I've not stopped thinking about them since.
I think the one thing that I kind of regret is that my tastes change postpartum to pre. So like with the treats, I was like, oh, very light because like I have so much acid reflux and like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, I won't be able to handle it. And then afterwards I'm like, where's the heavy fatty stuff? Like,
give me all the sugar.
Yeah. I'm like, I could have gone real hardcore with that. But no, it was so
so good.
Those tahini cookies were just like,
It's so wonderful to hear people like talk about the food and how much of an impact it has. You know, I get messages from families and, oh, my kids ate this and they love that, or like we've eaten everything, and it's so rewarding, you know, to know that I've like had an impact on so many families and like their day-to-day, you know, life. So
I would love to start off with just a little bit of your background and how you kind of came to be creating the Uplifted. Yeah.
Yes.
Uplifted Collective.
Uplifted Collective, yeah.
Well, I think the catalyst for me was when I was 9, my mum had a home birth with my brother. So I'm going way back, but I think it's like poignant to start there. She was very adamant that we were all there, and we got to experience like what that was like to be around and like with family when my mum was giving birth. And sorry, I'm getting a bit like nervous.
No, that's okay. Really quickly though, because I know that this is actually a question that people often ask when they're inviting their kids into the birth space. Because, I mean, not many people our age would have experienced birth as a child. So from someone who has, how did that affect you? Was it traumatic at all?
No, definitely not traumatic at all. We went to all of the midwife appointments. And my mum's midwife's actually Jen Ireland, who runs Mama Midwifery in Melbourne. So she's quite well known now. We were very involved the whole process, and then I was with her for like the 12 hours. It definitely changed the game for me because I was like, oh my gosh, this is like so cool, and like look how powerful my mum is, and you know, just seeing her being able to like go to bed afterwards. And then I think from then on I was just like, I need to be around babies and mums at like any chance I could get. I just loved, my mum was definitely very open and like let us help with a lot of things and showed us a lot of things and was quite, let us be really independent. And so I think, you know, I was like always holding my brother and like wanting to help her and all of that kind of thing. So then I would, you know, my brother got older, so I was like, oh, I want to go to, you know, your friend's house that's had a baby. I just want to like go and hold the baby and like help around the house. So definitely that drive or that passion for that, I think definitely started then. I don't think prior to that I was really aware of that kind of thing. So, and
That's
it just
really quickly. That's pretty amazing to like have that knowing from such a young age, and for something for birth, I guess, to have impacted you so much that you've taken it through your life and like transformed that into your career path. So no, it's
really cool. Looking back, you know, my mum was like, "Oh, don't you remember going to like listed like 10 people's houses?" And was like, "You asked to go there like on the weekends and things." So it's funny when you then look back and you can see like I can see a very clear thread of the impact that had on me. And babysat and nannied through like high school, and I went to culinary school. So I didn't really go down any, I guess, educational route for, you know, mothers and families, but I always babysat and nannied and was always around families. So that was really important to me, and I really like thrived off that. But I loved food from a young age, and so that was something that I was really wanting to, you know, focus on, and it just brought so much joy to people. And I definitely saw that from my grandma, and like being so excited to go to her house, and like the food was always seasoned really well, and she always had snacks. And so we were like, oh, what she made, like cakes and treats and stuff.
Noted for when I'm a grandma. Like,
yes, yeah.
Have snacks. Grandchildren will love you.
Like the cookie jar and stuff like that. So yeah, I think I saw how it like lit people up and how much we were excited. And so I think from, you know, that was always something that I really, really enjoyed. So I kind of took that route initially. Went to culinary school, worked in restaurants in Melbourne, and then decided to move to New York and wanted to have a culinary experience there. But yeah, something just I felt like something was missing, and I really wanted to be able to do more. And I actually watched a documentary in New York when I was like working at a restaurant, and it was a birth documentary, and I would have been like 22 maybe. And I was like, oh my God, I had no idea. I thought everyone gave birth at home. And I was like, I can't believe that this, like, you know, just seeing all these different stories and seeing what happened, and then like the aftermath of those types of experiences that didn't go maybe the way that women had thought that they would, for whatever reason. And yeah, it just blew me away. I felt really naive. I was like, oh, I just thought that women went to hospital because like there was like actually a real serious emergency, and not that women were going to have their babies there. I don't know, maybe my mum did tell me, but I think because my experience was I was so involved in that, I just I didn't realize. And I think that's when it clicked for me. I was like, well, I've always loved babies and families, so how can I combine the culinary side of things, which obviously we all have to eat, and I loved food so much. So it was, I think that's when it clicked for me. So I decided to kind of focus more on that, and I went and studied, and I was a nanny, high profile nanny, and private chef, and kind of that allowed me to build up all my skill sets. So
honestly, where do I sign up for this type of thing? Oh my gosh. When you left actually after cooking for us, I was dreaming of like, okay, so how would I potentially have a full-time chef be in the house who could also just look after stuff the way you did? So I remember walking in the house, and we'd been out all day, but you'd been there all day, and it was immaculate. Like, it was actually way cleaner than I had left it. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, you would have felt the same. Like, how do I get this full-time? Because I was blown away. But anyway.
Oh, thank you. I would love to be able to, clone myself and be in all of everyone's houses.
That's what we need to do.
You need to start like a training program. But anyway, so after you were like working in the private chef in houses, how did you kind of morph into being more of like, because did you do doula training?
Yeah. So I was like a private chef and nanny. So I would, had a few families that I worked for chunks of time. So not multiple families at once, but a couple of families. And that allowed me to go and study. So I did quite a few different modalities. So I grew up, both my parents are like in the holistic field. And I definitely knew that there was a connection between like the mind, body and spirit, and that it all wasn't just about the physical. So I went and studied at Carriage Birth House for postpartum and birth doula training. So I did both of those. And then went and studied nutrition, I studied kinesiology, and then went down like the morphogenic field route and emotion code. So looking at how, our emotions and our psyche have a huge impact on our experience, obviously, and how that kind of is all intertwined in care for families and specifically for mothers. So I think for postpartum care for me is really about mother care and not so much about the baby. I think that's where we need to be focused. So I knew that there were other skill sets that were important in supporting women holistically and not just with the food. And I think that, again, has come from my background and just seeing my mum take care, both of my parents take care of clients and seeing like a wide range of different things, and some physical, some more emotional or more mental, and just really wanting to, be able to support women in a very like holistic way. The food obviously is huge, but that other side of things, and also did massage. So there was like this toolkit of things that I wanted to be able to bring to that. So I think, working in that way in the States allowed me to go and study all of that.
Can I ask a question? Postpartum care for your own mother, did she have anything planned out or organised for her own postpartum that you would have experienced?
Definitely a lot of family, support. Like my grandma was around, my mum's cousin and her children helped. I don't remember her like prepping a lot of food or anything like that. But I don't think it's probably the way that I would approach it now, but I definitely think she had like a strong community then. My mum and dad ran their own business, so my dad was around a lot, and so I think that they were able to kind of juggle that quite well. So I wonder, like I've been thinking about that a lot, and I've been like, I always ask like my grandma and like my cousins and stuff, like, oh, what was your experience like, and what did you do, and what were your births like? But I think definitely the community element was there. I don't remember there being like a lot of like food prep or anything like that. But I feel like he was the fourth child, so I have sisters that are twins in between us. So I want to go and have like more of an in-depth conversation and just be like, did you think about these things?
Yeah, because like I've been thinking prior to this conversation, I've been thinking a lot about postpartum care and how so many traditions have this like set time for women postpartum where it's like a, I can't think of the word, where is it? Confinement period or like a laying in bed period where like she is to do nothing and the community is to come around, or the mother moves in or mother-in-law moves in and takes care of the other children and the housework and that kind of thing. And I feel like Western culture is like the only culture that has nothing, like just gives no support to women postpartum. And it's really interesting because obviously that's you've still come from this culture to then, and I mean, this area obviously is a lot different.
Well, I was actually also thinking about this recently too, because I've seen some stuff popping up of like, you know, like I know that your community and my community or the wider community are really bringing back those more traditions or that support, like that mother-centered support. So like, you know, we're doing meal trains and we're doing this and we're doing that, but it still heavily falls on mothers to do the mother work. Yeah. And which, you know, is beautiful, but also it's still not, like we're still not set up to be constantly outpouring our energy and the things that mothers really need for other mothers. So
Yeah.
I've noticed that a lot too.
Yeah.
Like we're all trying to really encourage each other to do more for other people, but we're also like,
we need to respect your time and space.
yeah, like
and,
we're also at capacity. A lot of mums are just kind of trying to look after their own broods.
That's like the most interesting thing that I found this time around. I shout out to my community. I've got a freaking amazing community here, but it's like the people who I think were the most generous to me postpartum were the people who probably have the least amount of time, energy to give. And I feel like I probably fall into that category. I love cooking for people just because I know, like, even though it does take extra time and takes from my capacity or whatever, I know how helpful it was just to have those meals. So it's like, it's just one of those things where, it's big that we're just relying on mothers for this, but it's the mothers that know how important it is. But
then insert you.
And others that are able to kind of have more time to do that. I think the biggest way we learn is always going to be through experience. So I think like if I didn't have that experience when I was younger, who knows where I would be today. And I think I get that a lot. Like a lot of first time mums are like, oh, I had no idea. Like now I can see what I would have done differently for my other friends that had had babies. Experience trumps everything, doesn't it? And we just have to be able to like talk about it. And I mean, I learn a lot from listening to your podcast and podcasts, and hearing people's stories and things like that. So there's a lot of ways to kind of have experiences, but when it's happening to you, it's always going to be the most like impactful. How can we start to like spread that in a way that impacts other people? And there's no ritual around postpartum, or there's not even really like that much of a reverence for it either.
So many people
bring that back.
So many people think they can just do it themselves as well, and I think that's something that you actually can't. Like if you think you're doing your own postpartum, you're not. And I just wanted to like put out there, because this time postpartum, and I think I've mentioned this on the podcast a few times before, but I set myself up like completely. So I did get a postpartum doula. Shout out to Prema, she's amazing. And she like when I spoke to her, because I wasn't actually 100% sure what a postpartum doula did, and I think everyone has different offerings. So she cooked meals, but they were very specific to I guess the healing phases of postpartum. So like super bland at the start, and she did prep me for that. She's like, look, I try and give it as much like flavor as possible, but to like build that like your stomach fire and that kind of thing, like it kind of needs to be these more bland foods to begin with, and then we like build up. And I was like, sweet, great. And then she focused a lot on bodywork as well, which was awesome, which are the things that I really wanted, because my postpartum with Poet was just like my body fell apart. So I was like, stick it back together, please. with everything you can. And that included, sits baths, cranio. She did cranio for Margot, which is amazing. And what else? Got like yoni steams. There was a whole bunch of other things, but my illness brain is not functioning for me right now. But it was really like, I just found that alone wouldn't have been enough. Like, because I also got a nanny to help look after the kids. My husband works at home, or works from home and then also away. And so we need the kids out so he can continue working. And if he doesn't get to work, he's stressed out, which means the whole house is stressed out, which makes me feel guilty. So I have to be on my feet doing shit and helping around the house. So it was like, okay, I can't be doing that. I need to get someone to do kids like however many times a week just to take that pressure off so he can help. Those two things alone still wouldn't have been enough, because the house needs to be cleaned. And like you start adding, it's actually when you start adding up the things you do as a mother,
if there's any pregnant person listening to
Mate.
this, just exhale.
yes, I know,
Please.
But the thing is that this is stuff that we take on as mothers, gets zero credit. But as soon as you outsource it, you can start adding up how much you're worth.
Pretty quickly.
Yeah. So like, yeah, cleaning, like the house needed to be cleaned, food needed to be cooked, it needed to be bought, it needed like that kind of thing. Kids needed to be looked after. And then I was able to rest. So yeah. And then obviously the things that Prema brought to the game, which was the bodywork as well. After maybe 6, 7, 8 weeks, I was like on fire. I felt so good. And I recovered from Willow's, my first, really quickly. And I'm just going to put that down to I was young. Didn't have any other babies. Like it was easy enough pregnancy, birth, all of the things. But the others, not so much. So yeah, this time, and I was saying to you before we started recording, Addison, that like now 5 doesn't seem any more than 4. Like we've just gone into such a good flow. I mean, we've got a nanny once a week still just to help out with the podcast. But it's just like kept the whole house running smoothly. It's not like everyone had to shut down over that time, but I could. And like for a mother in their family to shut down is like
it's crucial.
lot. Yeah, it's crucial, but it's also like it affects a whole ecosystem. And we also had a meal train and friends coming to support us as well and doing some drop-offs. And like I had a friend organize a WhatsApp group for me, which I'm going to put this out there because I think it's just a phenomenal idea. But a WhatsApp group for if I need lifts for my kids to or great. From school. Yeah. And it's just like all the women in the area who do that school drop, who have a few extra seats in their car, and I can just put a shout out. Like, can anyone take 2 kids this day or pick up or whatever? And it was just like, just gave me so much breathing room to shut down, to recoup, to regenerate. And now I just, apart from being hit by COVID, now I just feel like, oh shit, I can take on the world, and like already feeling capable enough to cook for other postpartum mums and to put that support back into the community. I feel like I'm on top of it with the house, with my kids, like not feeling overwhelmed at all. And I just can't believe the difference. So anyway, went on a bit of a rant, but
it all made sense.
Yeah. But like just wanted to like
highlight how
significant
help. Yeah.
Like the impact is so significant. And just, I think that the work of postpartum doulas is not like, it's just not out there enough, because if I had have known how bloody good this recovery would have been 2-3 children ago, that's where my investment would have gone every time. So yeah, like, I don't know. I feel like you don't need to spend anything on birth, prenatally,
or the nursery. Even like a lot of attention goes to like birth and nursery setup and all of that kind of stuff. And like, great if that's what you want to do, but once you're on the other side, you're on the other side. You know, like once postpartum is there, you've got this baby that you now need to take care of and take care of yourself. And so, I mean, postpartum care should really be about like, how do we support the parents and the family system? And like, my role is very much about the mother when I'm there, but how can we help families to set that up? So it really should be like this bird's eye view and this like ecosystem of like, okay, what things do we need to make sure are taken care of? You know, the house, you know, the kids, other kids, food, you know, the things that keep that thriving. And it's quite, you kind of want to be fairly strategic with it, you know, and have those types of conversations with your partner and your family or your community and what that can look like, because not everyone's postpartum will look the same. I mean, I would want mums to feel very rested and, you know, deeply taken care of, but that, you know, maybe a lot of paid support for some people and not so much for others. So again, like it's a bit of a puzzle, and like how do you make that puzzle work? And I think that comes down to you having a lot of conversations when you're pregnant, or, if you're planning to have a baby, of what ways can you support yourself afterwards, and for how long, and how can you basically set up a new ecosystem to kind of work around you. Because ultimately that rest is so important that, I would hope that women feel like you felt coming out of that, 6, 7, 8 week mark. And, that recovery period is so poignant. I mean, yes, you can continue to recover, and, you'd hope that mums weren't going nuts and doing all the things like straight away. But to be able to feel really energized and healthy and kind of like you've got a newfound energy there is just important.
Even capable, like, because Togga went away, I think it was 3 weeks postpartum, and I actually had my family coming in, flying up from Melbourne to help when he did in that first 6 weeks. I'm like, anytime he's away, like some family has to come up and stay with me and help. But there was 2 nights there that I was by myself with the 5 kids. And at 3 weeks, I was just like, I can't do this. Like, I was so overwhelmed. I was like, absolutely not. I can't do this. How am I going to do this? I'll never be able to do this. Like, all those like negative spiral kind of happened. And then as soon as he came back, I was like, oh, easy. Like, this is easy again. And then my postpartum doula was back doing things around the house, and I'm like, oh, okay. And then like the cleaner came and sorted my house out. I was like, oh my God, okay. So like it all like eased up. But I think in that, what that showed me was in that first 6 weeks, or maybe 6 to 8 weeks, like having that really strong support, just like it just takes you out of those moments of overwhelm.
Yes, absolutely.
And then like from after that, I was like, oh, I do have this. And like, I feel like every mother needs that postpartum. Like, you need to be coming out of it like, oh, I've got this. And now when I look back at past me in that newborn phase, where I've gone through those spirals very early and just been like, I can't do this. Like, what's wrong with me? Blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm like, that cashier just wasn't supported postpartum. Like, I had not set up anything. Like, I think maybe because there's no tradition or culture around postpartum here, we don't think to set up postpartum for ourselves. And because everyone kind of lives away from family, it just feels like, okay, well, we've just got to do this.
Just, get through it as much as we can.
Yeah. But I just can't explain the difference that I felt between, having all that support and not. So, I feel like I'm repeating myself. Yeah. Can I?
Pass the mic. No.
Yeah. It's just like, go, take it away.
I'd love to hear your perspective on like certain types of like actual nutrition. So it's like one thing to get a meal dropped, but like your focal point and obviously your expertise, like you've been to culinary school, you've studied, from certain people and certain cultures, what types of food is great to eat and how you kind of intertwine that with your offerings, or like when you're cooking for a family. Like, do you prioritize that, or what does it look like for you?
Yeah, so when I was studying nutrition and then the morphogenic field, we actually had to study Weston A. Price and also Pottinger's cat, the Pottinger's cat experiment, which looked at like nutrition through generations, as well as a lot of other elements, but they were 2 quite heavily focused in our studies. So I'm definitely of the train of thought of eating like nose to tail and very nutrient dense foods and cutting out a lot of like the processed stuff. So focusing on, fermented foods, eating a good amount of protein from animal sources. I know that there can be, people have certain ways of eating and diets and all of that kind of stuff. So I definitely, from my studies and my approach, is very much looking at how we can incorporate organ meats and proteins into the food, and trying to make the food that mums love to eat really, really nutrient dense. So you want to look at like really focus on whole foods. So, high quality vegetables, trying to look at like soaking grains and working with different proteins and dairy or non-dairy. Being a chef, you can kind of work with any dietary requirement, but it's definitely focusing on how to get that nutrients into the food. And I think that we just don't do that to begin with. We don't really have like a wide understanding of like eating that way. So yeah, it's interesting like talking to families and like starting to work with them and cook for them and showing them different ways to incorporate maybe organ meats or broth or fermented foods. A lot of people didn't know what kefir was or sauerkraut, or didn't really maybe understand how to incorporate that into their diet that, felt comfortable and made sense to them. So, having like feedback from families saying like, oh, it's just like I feel so much better, or like my milk production's amazing, or I don't feel as tired. I definitely feel like there's quite a learning curve for families, and kind of understanding that, and then seeing that, even years down the track, I'm still working with some families, and it's been like 4 or 5 years. So they've kept me on for the food. So it's really
understandable.
Yeah. So I think it's not about, for me, it's never about like cutting anything specific out. Of course, people come to me with certain ways of eating, or maybe they're focused on eating or having a particular diet. But, I just figure out how to work with that. But yeah, you don't want to cut any specific food group out, but you do want to focus on really nutrient dense food. So like even I try not to cook with refined sugar at all. I try and use honey, maple syrup, coconut sugar, those types of things, just to kind of keep the blood sugar as stable as possible. So it's not anything out of the ordinary. It's just kind of coming back to our roots, and it's very like ancestral. It's like, okay, how can we work with proteins, vegetables, grains, sugars in a way that is going to really like rejuvenate and rebuild the body. And then obviously like different families want different things. So then how can we incorporate that? And the biggest thing is you want to eat food that you love to eat. It shouldn't be a time that you're restricting anything or worried about, is this going to be too much, or is this too sweet, or, obviously, like I said, everyone has taste preferences and all of that. But ensuring that you have lots of food on hand, because that's the other thing. The first thing that goes when we're stressed is food. Mm-hmm. There's so many steps to the process of like, what are we going to make? Now I need to write a list. Do I have any of it? Now I need to go buy the ingredients. Now I'm going to cook it. Now I have to clean. So there's all of those kind of things. And I think that is, it's stressful for people. I love doing it, but I have loved it for a really long time.
I actually love that you mentioned that, because now like like before, and I was talking about kind of like our wider communities who are really into bringing those nutritional values back from like Chinese medicine perspective.
Yeah.
So when they're dropping food off, it's like soup, broth, congee. And I had a friend who had a baby recently, and I was like, I've got this in the I'll cook like whatever it is. Her partner was like, oh, she's actually super fussy. She's into that, all of that first like month of whatever food. And I was like, no, I'll cook you anything. Like,
yeah, whatever you
there's
want.
like this preconceived notion that if you're dropping a meal to a mum in the first 40 days, that it has to be like on the list. But I actually do love that you've mentioned that, because it can be anything.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
It can be anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that foods are really warming.
Yeah.
And, Katia was talking about like that it might be more Ayurvedic, where they like focus on like the blandness of the food changing. And even like Chinese confinement, they are very specific with the foods that they cook in an order, like a weekly kind of order of things. But yeah, I mean, ultimately you don't want to go and change anyone's diet drastically, and you want people to feel like they're having a lot of comfort food and the food that they love. So I think that there's like lots of ways to make that more nutrient dense. So even if, you know, instead of using store-bought, you know, broth, you can make some broth, or, you know, I mean, obviously like can do that for families and do that for families. So there's always like little tweaks that you can make. Obviously that's my job, but for people who are looking to kind of build that for themselves or cook for themselves for their postpartum, there's lots of ways. Like you can do, you know, the dried organ powder. You can add that into like different sauces and curries and soups and things that you're making. Using like meat stock instead of, you know, stock cubes or broth from the store. Like you're just going to get so much more collagen and minerals from that. So it's really about like what food makes your body feel really good and what makes you feel happy. And
if we had to put a rule down for foods, so say we are cooking for a postpartum mum, like I'll ask, but I'm also going to have my own input on this.
I'm asking, but really I'm telling.
But if we had to like say a mum's just like, yeah, cook me whatever, what would be the main things you want to stick to when cooking for a mum postpartum?
Or leave out.
Yes. Okay. So the first thing I would say is some sort of meat stock so that you can use. It's great to just drink, and or use, you know, put eggs in it or noodles or something. You can make a really quick meal with that. So definitely some sort of meat stock, I would say. The other thing would be something that has some sort of protein in it that is cooked well. So, you know, slow cooked or some sort of curry, and things that have warming spices in it. It's quite known postpartum that you would focus on those things and not eat a lot of like raw or cold food. But yeah, definitely something that is a meal that can be eaten without having to have a lot of other parts to it. So not having to steam veggies or add a bunch of other things. So kind of your casseroles, curries, different sauces and things that you're going to have your vegetable and your protein in there. It can just be something that's eaten from a bowl or a cup is really, really good. I definitely would say like one-handed snacks are always really, really important, and that can be, I think, a mix of savoury and sweet is a really good idea, because sometimes you want a bit more of a protein hit and not so much the sweet snack. So having a mixture of those, but you blow it out of the water when you say like protein and veggies and something. Like it could literally be, you know, a soup or a pie, you know. Yeah. So
I think like some of the things that I would generally focus on is hydrating and warmth.
Yes.
So and using spices like ginger, cinnamon, like all those ones that are really warming. Yeah. Spices as well. Yeah. But I think everything that you suggested.
What about like category. To keep out? Because I know in like TCM there's and actually more Ayurveda, it's like exclude. Is there anything that you feel is important to exclude when cooking for a mum?
I would just say just watch the refined sugar. Just being mindful of that. Trying to have things that have more natural sugars in them. I think that that's just really important. We definitely don't want to, like I said, exclude anything, because I think that throws you back into like a bit of a diet culture of, oh, you can't have this or you can't have that. But I think making sure that you're not eating anything raw and cold is probably my main rule. And then I would just say, making sure that refined sugar is kept to a minimum. But go for like all of the other kind of treats that, you know, even a spoon of honey sometimes is enough to kind of give you that sweet craving.
I was such a sugar fiend postpartum.
I think we all are for a good reason. But something that I know a couple of my friends are really big on is that when there's a baby born, if you're like really stressed or overwhelmed and it's causing you stress to cook for the mum, like just skip it and ask somebody else to do it until you're okay, because like the energy behind cooking and then delivering it is such a big thing. And I know there's a couple mums, you know, like close friends of mine who are really big on this. And since you're kind of a bit of an expert in that area, I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah. So, yeah, are you talking about like other mothers cooking for you, but not?
Yeah, let's
not
just say
doing
like I
that?
am stressed, I'm angry, like this is putting me out, like
Yes.
this is not convenient. I have to go and like, I don't know, do all these things and to be able to prepare for this meal that I've got to go drop to a mum that I don't barely know. And it's not, I've just made that scenario up by the way, but like a lot of people
Yes.
would feel like that. And I know if they're being honest with themselves, sometimes it can feel like it's too much or it's putting them out or it's inconvenient. So like that feeling behind that and you're cooking with that
Energy.
and with that energy, how does that translate in
Well,
food?
Just
Yeah.
cook the meal and then just say to the meal, I love you, I love you, I love,
love you, I love you.
Yeah, like beautiful thoughts into
Take
it.
all
It's
the
like,
bad vibes out.
yeah. It's like, and just like surround it with your crystals before you take it.
Well, it's definitely a thread of throughout, I think, you know, us as females and then also through motherhood of like always putting everyone else first, right? I see that a lot in motherhood and even not wanting to ask for help or whatever. So I do think that my feelings around it is always take care of yourself first, because then everything from that is going to have so much more power and energy behind it. So, you know, sometimes it's just not the right season for you to be taking care of other people. And if you said that you've, you know, committed to something and you can't do that, then it's better to swap with somebody else or, you know, say that you just can't do it at that moment and you can maybe do it another time. Because I think yeah, I mean, energy is super, you know, it's really, really important, and we emotionally regulate with the people that we're around. And I do think there's a huge impact on, you know, I'm very mindful of that when I'm cooking and, you know, how I'm showing up and what energy I'm bringing to the table and how I'm cooking the food. And, you know, it's not, it's a subtlety there, but it is a subtlety that does have a huge impact. And I've definitely seen it. Like food doesn't, for me, like will taste different and or it didn't turn out the way that I wanted, or I like burn myself, or, you know, like the things will happen that will like show you, especially for me, like cooking every day and being a chef, like you'll see that that kind of flow gets inhibited. And that's, yeah, it's definitely felt the same way. Like, you know, you can walk into a room and know that maybe someone's, you know, not in a great mood. Yeah. So I think for me that just brings it back to that thread of being able to kind of ask for what we need and putting ourselves first, because ultimately, you know, in my eyes, that's what postpartum is. Like it's how can you take care of yourself, because your baby needs you. Your baby is relying on you to emotionally regulate and for nourishment and all of that. And if you're not okay, then the baby's not okay. So, that's why I'm like so heavily focused on making sure that the mum is well fed and nourished and can talk about the things that are on her mind. And, you know, we can troubleshoot different things, because it's not smooth sailing. But I think if you can have people around you that are solution orientated and can help you figure out that puzzle, even if it starts to break apart postpartum, like a lot of planning will go a long way, but sometimes things just happen. Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting because I see a wide spectrum of families and mothers. And I would say that the mums that are very solution orientated and have like kind of this really positive baseline, like mentally and emotionally, definitely gravitate to the more instinctual ways of parenting, because there's not that chaos in their head of, oh, am I doing this wrong? And I want to do this all on my own and I can't ask for help, or I have to make sure this person's okay before I go and do my thing, versus, you know, the other end of the spectrum where maybe that groundedness and that kind of chaos isn't kind of managed. And so the anxiety kicks in, and then you see that strip away from all of that intuitive ways of parenting of, you know, like co-sleeping and contact napping and feeding on demand and the things that are required, you know, biologically and neurologically for the mother and for the child. That just gets stripped away immediately. So yeah, it's interesting because that on the other side, postpartum cooking for other mums, you know, can directly be related to the postpartum experience for the mother, and like how do we ask for what we need and put those things in place. It's huge.
I've never thought about that before. That like the anxiety, and it, now that you've mentioned it, like that anxious picture of like the career-focused woman who's had a baby, who does go and buy all the things for the baby, who wants to sleep train and feed schedule and is planning to go back to work 6 weeks postpartum, it's such an ungrounded, high anxiety picture, isn't it? And like I couldn't imagine seeing that mother getting her postpartum support in place and resting postpartum and making sure she's well nourished and making sure that, like it does make sense that the women who do hold any kind of spaciousness around that postpartum period are the ones who are feeding on demand, who are co-sleeping, who are, I never even put that together, but
yeah,
I can see that.
Yeah,
it's like it seems so obvious right now.
Yeah, and I think from the like literally hundreds of women that I've seen, there's a very broad spectrum, but it's very fascinating because it just highlights, like, obviously I'm there in some capacity, so because I'm there seeing, like, witnessing this, but you just see the cascade and the domino effect of like how that affects the rest of the family. But the biggest thing is it's affecting the parent dynamic, and then that starts to crumble, and, you know, building that back up can take a lot of work versus, you know, getting in that mindset and being prepared for like what is going to happen on the other side, and knowing that you've got, even if you didn't pay anyone and you literally set it up yourself and you cooked with your friends or whatever, but knew who to ask or knew who to call, or okay, like if I am feeling anxious, like who would I go to? Do I have a psychologist or a doctor? Can I get a mental health plan? Would I go see my kinesiologist or whatever? So it's just, it's having like a lot of conversations and what that can be like on the other side. But I think the biggest thing is mindset. But we're taught as women to like just take care of everybody else first and not take care of ourselves. So to think that that's just going to change in an instant when you have a baby is, you know, absurd. So, you know, having those types of conversations and
I think that's like an important point to highlight, because if we're taking care of everyone else, like actually taking care of ourselves postpartum is taking care of our baby. It's like the best thing that you can do, and not just our baby, but like our entire family. Yeah. So it's, just like wanted to highlight that for everyone out there.
All the conversations. The ripple effect is so powerful. And I think like my approach with food is, yes, the food is, you know, we want to make sure that the mum's eating all of the food and food that she loves, but also the whole family is supported. So, you know, the other kids and the partner and anyone else who might be there helping. And I think with my chef background and my chef training and being trained in a way to do a lot of cooking at once allows for, in a short space of time, a lot be made.
Well, I think that was like one of the most impressive things. Like me
honestly,
and Chloe,
at my old house, I had a 4-burner stove, and you could fit like one big pot in the oven at a time, and I like had so much food at the end. I was amazed. I was like, how?
Yeah, like just the ability to have so many meals going at one time. I think like me and Chloe were on the phone like for days afterwards, just like, oh my God, my mind is blown. Like, how does this woman do it? It was really, really impressive.
So impressive.
But what I'd really love to know, because I know that a lot of people don't get postpartum doulas. So if someone was interested in your work or just obtaining a postpartum doula in general, what is the process? So you would find out you're knocked up.
Buy a deep freezer. The rest is history.
Literally. As the one investment, I'm like, make sure you have freezer space.
And then they would stumble across you at the Uplifted Collective. What's the process?
So from there, we'd normally have like a phone consult, or I would meet up with the families, and then we would discuss, where they're at, what they're hoping for, I've had people call me like right before they're giving birth, and I've had people literally 4 weeks, into their pregnancy, and they email me and I'm like, I was always wanted to work with you, like save me a spot. So it's such a unique, approach to each family, and really getting to know them and know what they want out of that. I guess my care is very much focused around the food and then the body and energy work for the mother when I'm there. But that process beforehand, I will always do like a prenatal, session. So I would cook before birth, and we would have the massage and all of that kind of stuff. And then any other support that is needed in setting up their postpartum. So we'll have discussions around that within that consult. I think if people are looking for postpartum doulas, there's a few. I think Village Mama has a directory that she's set up. And then there's Gather in Melbourne that also have doulas, and there's some different collectives, and people can like just, I guess, even type it in like postpartum support and the city that they're in. But like we've said a few times, the biggest thing is that every doula is going to postpartum doula is going to offer something different, because you'd have some sort of postpartum training wherever that may be in the world, but everyone brings other modalities to that. So I think knowing what you're after and having discussions with a few doulas, even just on the phone, or if you can meet them, is always really important, because you want to feel really connected to them and feel like they can be in your space. And, most women, are breastfeeding and, maybe nude sometimes. So you like want to feel comfortable with them. Obviously, that can take a little bit, but I feel like you can generally know from the get-go, like once you've met someone, whether you would feel comfortable having them around. And especially someone who's in that field, they've been doing it for so long, there's definitely like maybe a presence that they have that can be quite trusting. So I think it's just getting to know what the doula's offering, what their expertise is. Because not everyone's a chef, or not everyone offers massage. Sometimes it's more focused around the home, or it's heavily focused on bodywork. So I think it's just understanding what they offer and then figuring out what you want and what would be important to you in the postpartum period. I do think bodywork is, I just want to add that in there, is really, really, really beneficial. I think that we are social creatures, and we thrive off, touch and being connected to other people. And I think when your body is in that space, it's like you've kind of run a huge marathon and your body's really sore, and you need that recovery. But having the massage not only releases physical tension, but I really do think that it lets go sometimes of a lot of emotional tension that we hold on to. Definitely seen, mums kind of tear up or start to talk about something that we weren't even talking about when doing, giving a massage or acupressure or belly binding or gua sha, whatever it is. But I think that having a, postpartum support person being able to, offer that is just, is in my eyes is really important, as much as it is the food. But it's so impactful, and it also gives the mother this is time to rest. You need to lie down or sit down and just relax the body. So it's just very, very important. So just something to think about when you're talking to different postpartum carers and looking at what they're offering. And
I'd have to second that. Bodywork was massive one postpartum. But it's funny that you mention the talking, because I remember speaking with Prema while she'd be cooking, and she'd walk, as she left, I'd be like, what was I even saying? Were my words even wording? I just don't even know. And by the end of it, I was like, thank you for helping me grow my brain back because I didn't really have anyone here. No, but seriously, I wasn't like fully functional like as a talking person, which is not ideal when you're podcasting. And I'm like, am I ever going to get this
Thank
back?
God we weren't podcasting.
Oh God, thank God. Thank everyone out there. Thanks us too. But yeah, by the end of it, I was just like, thank you so much for listening to all my random rambles and letting me grow my vocabulary back and just like string functioning sentences back again, because you're so blown out of this world postpartum that, yeah, coming back into yourself and just even being able to
I think you need a massage.
I need a massage. I need
She needs a little
sauna,
brain
mate.
growth.
Just like sweat this out. No. But yeah, that's like, yeah, I would definitely highlight that also.
Yeah, I had like weekly bodywork for, I think it was like 4 or 5 weeks. Right? It was just so good. And it was something like, I know a lot of women feel like they are more responsive to that type of thing if it's like booked in and it's like, hey, this is when I'm getting it and this is what I'm doing. And then it is time. It's like actual time where you just do shut down. So, and I feel like it's kind of like it's like a small amount of time, but it has such a big impact. So I think, super useful.
Yeah, and having someone, of course, you can book that outside of the home, but I think initially you don't really want to be going out of the home if you don't have to.
It's
So
good
having
when you get
someone
to come in,
yeah, and even if it's maybe not your postpartum doula, like you have a masseuse that comes to your house, like that's what I mean about the puzzle piece. It's not always you might cook all your food, but then you might be like, no, I'm going to invest and have a masseuse come to my house twice a week, you know, or once a week for 6 weeks. So it doesn't, you know, again, it doesn't have to be the postpartum carer that is offering you that. But it's just knowing like, you know, it's knowing what is needed in that time and knowing what you really like thrive off of and like how can you blend the two and maybe put in some additional things there that are going to just help you thrive as much as possible.
And then in the postpartum period, so how do you usually work out like how much time you spend with each family? Or I feel like we've spoken about this before, but correct me if I'm wrong. Have you done live-in work as well?
Yeah, I have done live-in work. I did not so much here in Australia because once I kind of came back, it was mainly focused on just postpartum care, but I have done live-in work a couple of times here. Husbands have had to go away and there was trips planned for work and things like that. And that's always like a game changer. So I, literally come in and take over everything.
That would honestly blow my mind.
So yeah, it's not something, definitely something that I'm like asked by the family. And if it all kind of works out, then I'm, you know, kind of happy to kind of support people in that way. But yeah, generally I would see families once or twice a week, but I kind of talk to the families and we gauge roughly how frequently they would like me to visit. And it can look like lots of different things. Some families are on a bit more of a budget, so I will come, you know, once or twice a week and then, you know, every fortnight for a little bit. So it's really just dependent on, you know, designing it to suit the family. But yeah, usually it's 4 hours at least once a week is kind of where it sits at the moment. So.
And I would imagine that ranges between postpartum doulas too, so it's a good one to speak to your postpartum doula about.
Like what their sessions are like, the timing for that, what kind of gets done.
And what does it look like in that 4 hour period? What does that look like?
So probably about 2/3 of it I would dedicate towards the food, and then the other portion is, you know, for the mother to have that relaxation time. So anything, you know, body work, energy work, belly binding, like all of the different things that we could do to support postpartum care. But that, you know, I do that in a prenatal session. So the mum has an experience of like, oh, these are all of the things. And so then she has autonomy to say to me like, oh, I want to focus on this today, or like, can we do these, you know, can we do massage and the emotion code, or can we do massage and belly binding or whatever. So it's definitely like a dynamic of like, let's talk about this and see how you're feeling and what works. And have had sometimes where mums are like, I just want the whole time dedicated to like, body work and that kind of thing. So that's definitely been, there's flexibility in that, but I'm mindful that food still needs to get made and all of that kind of thing. So, so it's very flexible in the session. There's, if mums are needing a bit more support that week, then we just cut the menu down slightly and, do more body and energy work in that situation.
Can I ask, Addison, how much can you get cooked in like 2.5 hours?
Or 20 minutes on the way home when you're about to catch your plane.
So normally in like a postpartum session, I would do anywhere from like, depending on what the meals are, anywhere from like 3 to 5 meals. I did the full day for you guys. So been doing like freezer fill. That's kind of what I call it. Yep. That's probably like anywhere from 12 to 14 different menu items. And they're large portions. So even like in postpartum, if I'm there weekly, I'm also mindful like, do families have freezer space?
Yeah.
Who's there? How many family members are there? A lot of kids. What kind of foods do they like to eat? It's also really good to have stuff that the kids love on hand. I think it's important that families eat together and eat very similar things, but I do know that that's not the case for all family dynamics, and some, kids want specific food. So if you can have that on stock, in the freezer, I don't know, crumb chicken and bolognese or, whatever their favorite foods are, like having small portions of that in the freezer is always great, because if you're wanting to eat something and they need to eat early, then you can just pull that out and you're not, not spending a lot of time making multiple different meals.
Yeah, I feel like that's something
that was awesome for me.
Yeah.
I mean, my kids eat everything that I eat as well, but it's just during that time, like sometimes kids aren't going to be wanting to eat broth, with an egg yolk in it.
Or a stew,
and so, but all the other things that you made were so good for them. Like they loved that. So yeah, and that worked so well for us, because sometimes it is the most important thing. You're cooking a meal for your whole family. It's never just you cooking a meal for you. So
yeah.
But how often too would you just cook for the kids? Your kids are probably better eaters than mine, but like so often I'll cook for my kids, especially if Togger's away, and I just won't cook for myself because I can't be bothered. But like I've had Addison's meals in the freezer.
I don't do that.
And I can
my kids starve if they don't eat what I eat. So
that's like every now and then, especially if I just need an easy meal and like I don't have to cook for Togger. And this is also why I love cooking for other women, because I'll make it a good excuse to cook for myself as well. Like put heaps of energy. Like when you were talking about the energy and the love, I'm like, well, if I'm going to make this meal, like part of it's going to me.
I'll keep some of that.
And I'm going to just like make it freaking awesome. And like, and it's like an excuse to look after my own as well. Yeah, myself, but like I'll usually make the kids eat it too. So
yeah, I cook, focusing on the food. When I'm cooking, I'm definitely thinking about what can I make, and can I make large portions of it? So I generally have to be told like, no, we don't have freezer space, so please don't make a massive pot of soup. So yeah, like you're getting, you'd be getting 6 to 10 meals out of a thing that I'm like a menu item that I'm making. So the idea is, definitely not just food for that week, but to build stock in the freezer over the time, so that then when I'm not there for the rest of the week, or like in future, you've got things that you can pull out, and also very mindful about, portion sizes and how things get frozen, and making sure that things are labeled, because you don't want to have this massive container of soup and then you're like, we don't want to eat that for 3 days. So just thinking about like, how can I just take out one container and that's 2 serves or 1 serve or whatever it might work for the family. So it's very nuanced, and not every family like you, like even with the two of you, you're like, oh, I do that and I don't do that. And so I really want to understand the family and the dynamic that's at play, and what the kids love, and what the mum loves, and like how can we make that work, and then how can we build up the freezer so that it is going to have a lot of food. And a lot of people, like, I would never have made large portions. Like I would always just make the dinner and then that's it. Like there was never anything left over to freeze. So I think that there's a bit of a stigma around frozen food, like not being fresh. I don't know, not being fresh, or people don't want to eat frozen food, but I think when it's been made in your home, the ingredients are high quality, it's really nutrient dense. Like it's so nice to just like, even for myself, take something out and just like heat it up, and you know that like so much love and care has gone into that, like whether you had made it previously or someone else has made it for you.
Yeah, I definitely took that away from your, like when you were here, I was like, okay, every time I make a stock or a bone broth, I'm just making a shit ton of it.
Yeah,
and I'm
massive pot.
chucking, and something that I'd never thought about before is like freezing it in portions so that you're not like unfreezing a whole thing. Yeah. And that just when you came and cooked for us, there were so many little aspects that I was just like, oh, she's really thought this one out. Like I never would have thought that. But
in fact, that was
sense.
the theme. That was the theme for you. I was like, because you're very different to me. You're opposite personality to me. I'm like, Kashia, she's like so detailed, so organized. Like this person has really thought about this, or it's just like I did not have any idea what we were actually getting. And then I saw that you sent like a menu, and then we chose the menu, and then you gave me all of the ingredients like separated into like cold food, fruit and veg aisle, like meat, like all the things. It was so seamless. I was like
meticulous.
And I was like, this is so easy because you've made it so easy. And I was like, you're like, well, what do you want to eat? I'm like, I don't know. And because obviously if you're pregnant, you can relate to like not having any idea what you actually want, but knowing what you really want, but you don't know how to ask for it. Yeah. Or what if you can't really like articulate what you don't know what you need, but you know what you want, but you don't. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Anyone who's pregnant is going to be like, oh my God, I feel so heard. But you were like, okay, I've got you. And I was like, thank God for that. I didn't have to actually choose, but you chose exactly what
I'm glad
we would have wanted. So
it's so nice to hear that feedback, because it can be big. Like it's a freezer feels like a huge shop and there's a lot going on, but I really want to make it as streamlined and as possible, and, really efficient, and not more stress on the mum or the parent system or whoever's kind of helping out. So
can we just clarify too for listeners? So a freezer fill is something that is different to postpartum doulaing. So and you offer that as a service for women, which is basically just a mass cook up a
full day. So I do postpartum care, and then I do in-home cooking. So that kind of came off the back of working with families, and then they're like, we don't want you to leave, hence why I'm still there 5 years later.
I can relate to that.
Which that has grown, and I have a chef that works with me and supports families in that way. So obviously, like, I've stayed on with the families that I've cared for postpartum, and that's kind of just naturally built by word of mouth. And then the freezer fill is more for families, like if they're not looking for, postpartum care ongoing, or like, for a chunk of time, then I can come in and, basically, fill up their freezer full of food like I did for you guys. And
more than a freezer, but
two freezers, I think. So that definitely, like, it still the same approach as I would, and obviously still mindful of all those things and the conversations and like the menus and all of that kind of stuff. But it is designed to be more of like a one-off. So I do have some people that do that occasionally throughout the year, like space it out. So it just gives people like an opportunity to have that without it being, I guess, ongoing to some degree. So
and it, like, so many times those meals have saved us in a time where I'm like, kids, you're just going to have scrambled eggs for dinner. Like, we've had an actual proper meal, because I'm like, oh, look, Addison's already cooked for us. No, it was really, truly amazing. All right. Well, Addison, if people want to find you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so website is upliftedcollective.com.au, and then Instagram is upliftedcollective. So either of those two spaces, email us through the website, or DM me on Instagram. But all the information's there, and happy to chat with anyone, and questions, all of the things.
And we can vouch for Addison's reliability and like type A personality.
If we lived in the same state, you'd be on speed dial.
Good, I'm glad. Thanks for the endorsement.
No, thank you so much for coming in, Addison. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
And also thank you for cooking for us.
Yes. It was a delight.
People were so jealous. I remember posting it on Instagram and people were like, what, where, who, how do I get it?
Yeah, no.
I was like, just,
Yeah.
you know.
I never even thought it was a service until until
so
Addison
cool.
popped up.
Well, I'm opening things up to travel for it as well. So I'd love to come back up here and cook for a bunch of families and do some freezer fills. So it's definitely, I'm based in Melbourne, but I have travelled to New York and then also throughout Australia. So I'm definitely looking to expand that and help families in that way. So don't hesitate to reach out because we'll definitely put people on a waiting list for when we come to the city. So
Amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Addison.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Road to Wisdom podcast. To join the journey, you can follow us on Instagram at theroadtowisdom.podcast and at www.theroadtowisdompodcast.com. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. We look forward to seeing you next week with more juicy content.